As a reporter, I've traveled the Middle East for many years. It's an area that has always fascinated me, but in my work, I've mainly covered its war zones, its crises, and its tragedies. This journey, which takes me down the Silk Road in the footsteps of Marco Polo, gives me the opportunity of exploring the great historical and cultural significance of this part of the world, its ancient melting pot of peoples and civilizations that have contributed so much to our own. We've arrived in Xi'an in the province of Shaanxi, right in the middle of China. Xi'an was the capital of the Chinese Empire for more than 1,000 years up until the 10th century. At the time, in the heyday of the Silk Road, it was the biggest city in the world with 2 million inhabitants. Today it numbers 8 million, which places it amongst the top 10 Chinese cities. In China, morning exercise is a serious business. It's a sport, a collective ritual, a martial art, and a life discipline. In the West, we know about Tai Chi, but as you can see here in Xi'an, the disciplines are much more varied. It helps you unwind. You have to think of someone you like. Actually, you have to think of someone who annoys you and... No, I'm only joking. In fact, it's a form of sport. It was from Xi'an, formerly Chang'an, that the first Chinese emperor, Qin Shi Huangdi, managed to unify the entire country in the 3rd century BCE, which allowed the Silk Road to come about. All the merchants ended up here beneath the gateway of the Western Wall. You have to imagine the caravans coming to the end of their long trek here at the very foot of these ramparts before the Western Gate. Impatiently expected by the emperor and his court, the ambassador merchants unloaded all their wares coming from the 4 corners of Asia. There were Persian horses, lions, lynxes, jade, diamonds, woolen materials because the Chinese had neither sheep nor goats. There was also, brought from the Mediterranean, coral and even escarlate, a very fine cloth from Venice. Venetians knew that they had to send the most expensive goods in exchange for the precious merchandise of which Xi'an was the capital. Because it was right here, 5,000 years ago, that the cultivating and weaving of silk was invented. The fashion designer, Fan Yanyan, cultivates this 50-century-old inheritance. Looking at how refined Madame Fan's fabrics are, it's easy to understand that Western women, beginning with those from the Roman Empire, were crazy about getting hold of Chinese silks. Madame Fan, where do you take your inspiration from for your creations?
I mainly draw inspiration from the Mogao caves. I chose to use silk so as to build my career around the culture of the Mogao caves, because silk is a Chinese cultural symbol. It is capable of representing the culture emanating from the caves.
On the edges of the Taklamakan Desert, these famous Mogao caves, known as the Caves of the Thousand Buddhas, are an essential link in the Silk Road. That's where the first great vestiges of Chinese Buddhism can be found. You mentioned the Caves of the Thousand Buddhas. What is it you find so moving about them? What were you looking for in terms of inspiration?
I spent 2 years in Dunhuang, I saw extremely refined wall paintings. For me, they represent an artistic treasure by which you can't help but be overwhelmed. The wall paintings in the Mogao caves are in fact from different periods. Each period has different styles and artistic forms. I like the wall paintings of all the periods because their forms and styles all have completely different artistic qualities. I wanted to find a way of transmitting this art. I chose silk after considering all its qualities, its gentleness, its suppleness, its comfort, its splendor. Silk fiber is considered to be the queen of fibers, as well as representing the wisdom of the Chinese people.
We know that the Chinese invented silk farming. That was thousands of years ago. Today, what remains of silk in Chinese culture?
Of course, the Chinese invented silk, but over the last years, the way it's used no longer transmits its noble character. Today, what I try to do is use the force of traditional Chinese culture in order to give silk a fresh definition, a more fashionable definition, more contemporary.
Madame Fan, what was your first experience of silk? What led you to discover and be so attracted to this material?
When I was small, not all families of the time had the means to wear silk. When I was 9 or 10, my mother brought me home a silk scarf. The first time that I touched this scarf, I adored it. It never left my side, and I didn't want to wear it. What I felt was its brilliance, its splendor, its gentleness, its comforts. Of all the clothes I'd ever worn in 10 years, I'd never known anything like it. At that moment, I fell in love with silk.
This extraordinary finesse which thrills Madame Fan built the reputation of silk in the ancient world. But it also led certain moralists to denounce silk as decadent and debauched. Seneca, the philosopher of ancient Rome, denounced clothes made from a material of such indecency that they hardly cover the body. That didn't stop silk being worth more than its weight in gold. It was a major contributor to the making of China's fortune, and of Xi'an in particular. The city centre is still inhabited by descendants of the merchants of the Silk Road, the Hui. The Hui minority are of the Hui Muslim faith, a rarity in China. They are still important traders, and they have retained cultural and culinary habits which are very different from the rest of the country. The bazaar in the Hui Quarter is very reminiscent of Central Asia. For the numerous Chinese tourists who come here, it's very exotic. The capital of the great Qin dynasty, Xi'an, remains the symbol of one of the golden ages of the Silk Road when China had exchanges with the entire known world. Since leaving Venice, we've been talking about dialogue between cultures for more than 12,000 kilometers along the Silk Road. But here in Xi'an, at the end of the road, Obomao, they're really going for it. Do you have one in my size? Can I try one on? Oba Mao. We've come full circle. At the center of the Hui Quarter is the Great Mosque of Xi'an. With its resemblance to a Chinese pagoda, it can be considered as one of the great monuments along the Silk Road. It was the people of the caravans who brought Islam to these parts, probably Persian merchants, ancestors of the Hui who pray in the mosque every Friday. We're in the oldest mosque in China. A stone dates it to the year 742. At that time, Xi'an was the capital of the empire, and the city contained more than 5,000 foreigners. Turkish, Arab, Armenian, Persian, but also Korean. They all had the right to pray as they wished and to build the places of worship they wanted. The most striking building, the most unexpected of mosques, is undoubtedly this pagoda. In fact, it's a minaret, but adapted in Chinese style. As is this gateway, adorned with Arabic cursive writing rather than ideograms. The present-day mosque, for the most part, dates back to the Ming dynasty to the 15th century. It's the work of Zheng He, a eunuch who became an admiral and rid the China seas of pirates. A member of the Hui minority and therefore Muslim, Zheng He was very much a favorite at the emperor's court. He was honored with the official title Sanbao Taijian, meaning Great Eunuch of the Three Jewels, and was allowed to embellish the mosque of his native city. There are still about 10 million Hui in China. Generally speaking, they don't tend to stand out in the 1.3 billion strong crowd of their co-citizens. The famous crab. Okay, I'll take a straw. A real little Chinese meal of the Hui minority. In Xi'an, the caravans weren't only at the origin of local Islam. The Silk Road also played a role for a religion which holds a very central place in Chinese culture. Here, at the giant wild goose pagoda, you can still feel the presence of Wang Qiang, a 7th century sage who undertook a 16-year journey to India and brought back the ancient Buddhist texts, which he translated over the rest of his life. He is undoubtedly the most well-known pilgrim of the Silk Road. Pilgrim, wise man, great translator and proponent of Buddhism, Wang Qiang is quite simply one of the most well-known characters of Chinese culture. The chronicle of his 16-year journey to India is a goldmine for historians of the Silk Road. It's also the basis of one of the most popular Chinese novels, Journey to the West, which is still known by virtually all Chinese today. The head of the Institute of Religious Arts, Professor Yue Yu, is a great connoisseur of the sutras or religious writings brought back from India. What's the importance of the giant wild goose pagoda for Chinese Buddhism?
This tower here has a very important emblematic significance because it was built upon the return of the monk Xuanzang after his journey to India to bring back Buddhist writings. And this is also where Xuanzang translated them. He was the one who translated the vast majority of them, making up 1,335 volumes. These 1,335 volumes represent a quarter of all the Buddhist writings translated into Chinese.
Around the 64-meter high pagoda, there's a monastery which also serves as a museum and pilgrimage center. The Indian prince Siddhartha Gautama is venerated here, known as the Awakened One, which means Buddha. How many Buddhists are there in China today? And what is the place of Buddhism in modern China?
In the world today, only 3% of Buddhists are Indian, while 46 to 48% of Buddhists are Chinese. So you could say today that Buddhist disciples, those who are interested in Buddhism, or simply people who venerate and respect Buddhism, are more numerous in China than anywhere else. Buddhism doesn't wait to receive charity from God or from Allah. You just need to learn and cultivate yourself all alone, and you are a Buddhist. In reality, you need to strive for it. It's like how the monk Xuanzang put it. I would rather take a step forward and die than half a step backwards and remain alive. That's the cultural spirit of the Silk Road.
Terminus of the Silk Road for the caravans of merchants arriving from the West, Xi'an is therefore also a starting point, the relay point from which Buddhism spread across China. Godless religion for some, mystic philosophy for others, Buddhism theorizes on reincarnation, but also non-violence and vegetarianism. The giant Wild Goose Pagoda remains one of the most important monasteries in China. Monks and nuns hold offices here each day in the midst of enormous crowds of tourists. Buddhism is one of the three doctrines of Xinjiao, or three-school system, which structures all Chinese thinking. It's the most recent of the trio, formed with Taoism and Confucianism. It has nearly 150 million followers, mostly belonging to the Chan school of Buddhism, meaning meditative state, and to the Pure Land school. A city buzzing with 8 million inhabitants, modern-day Xi'an well reflects what Asians call the awakening of the dragon. That's to say, the extraordinary economic boom in modern China. A country with a gross domestic product of more than $9 million, the second largest in the world, which is constantly building and investing. In the center of Xi'an, the clock tower still stands proudly as a reminder of ancient times, those of the Silk Road, of course. It dates back to the Ming Dynasty and was intending to demonstrate to merchants and travelers just how powerful the emperor was. Its enormous bell dates back to the 8th century and weighs more than 6 tons. It announced the arrival of the caravans, sounded the changing of the guard, and when necessary, gave the alarm. Today, compared to the new 30-story blocks of flats, the magnificent medieval tower seems quite modest. It nonetheless continues to determine modern-day Xi'an's urbanism, with its square-built sides each marking the beginning of a great avenue leading off towards the cardinal points. Gigantic avenues, each continuing for a dozen or so kilometers. Despite its triumphant modernism, the city has conserved certain traditions from the time of the Silk Road, such as the famous Chinese circus. The troupe of the Shaanxi region is one of the most famous in the country. Families put a lot of pressure on their children. In the circus, as with any other domain, they have to succeed, distinguish themselves in a system which is both communist and deeply meritocratic. The children of this troupe come from all over to live here as boarders, practicing every day with strict discipline and studying at school in the evening after rehearsals. As it happens, the troupe is currently preparing a show which pays homage to the Silk Road, as Madame Chen Haiyan, the artistic director, explains to me. Are the acrobatic techniques which we see in your show purely Chinese? Are they passed down from the traveling artists, jugglers and acrobats who worked in the stopover places along the Silk Road?
The Silk Road began in Xi'an, in the province of Shaanxi. From here it crossed Dunhuang, Persia, diverse places with very different styles and artistic techniques, until it arrived in ancient Rome. There are traditional Chinese numbers, like the Chinese vases, contortions, candle contortions, and also handstand routines. Balancing and contortions are particularly Chinese numbers. There is also the hat juggling number, which is one of the numbers combining and inspired from foreign techniques.
As we know, Xi'an is the starting point of the Silk Road. As a native of Xi'an yourself, what does the Silk Road inspire in you?
Xi'an and the Silk Road are inseparable. You might say that the Silk Road is a part of Xi'an, reaching out across different cities, and even the whole world. Being able to mix this vision of the Silk Road with the circus arts through our staging and creating a beautiful show, which we can perform for the whole world, which the inhabitants of each country will be able to come and see. I hope this will give people a better understanding of China, and that it will allow Chinese circus arts to develop.
In China, discipline and collective effort are values which are virtually sacred. It's the message taught by Confucius. Collective accomplishment is worth a lot more than personal interest, or rather, they go hand in hand. Just to the east of Xi'an, a staggering and unique monument precisely shows the importance and the power of the collective effort, such as Confucius presented it to the Chinese. It's the Terracotta Army, which guards the necropolis of the Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi, the unifier of the Middle Empire. This army of 6,000 horsemen, foot soldiers, bowmen, guards the tomb of the first Chinese emperor, Qin Shi Huangdi, who died in 221 BCE. He was the one who unified the country, and by doing so permitted the opening of the Silk Road. It's said that his concubines and the architects who knew too much about it were buried alive in his necropolis. Words fail to describe this astonishing army of the shadows, which watch over the eternal rest of the sun of the sky, the deified emperor who they are meant to accompany and guard in the afterlife. The authorities have granted me a very rare privilege to cross the barriers which hold back the tens of thousands of tourists to have direct contact with these terracotta statues. Or rather, to meet those who work on them, like Professor Lan Desheng, the head of the conservation teams, which restore one by one each statue. What's very striking is to see how realistic each statue is, to what point each face is different from the next. Do you think that real soldiers posed for these statues, or are they stylized?
The Terracotta Army is made up of thousands of people, thousands of faces. There's no fixed model. The artists first made sketches, then they used a mold, which they remodeled as they liked during the creation process. They began with a basic mold for the faces, which they would then personalize. There are thousands of different faces.
So, do you really think that a human posed for each statue or not?
There are a number of faces which are unique, but for the others, the basic models were reworked by the sculptors and craftsmen of the time. By adding, sticking, kneading, they worked as they pleased, which increased the possibilities.
In ancient Chinese tradition, soldiers and slaves were sacrificed at the feet of a lord who had died and were put in his tomb. Do these statues correspond to the famous substitution theory?
According to all the studies by archaeologists at the archaeological archives, before the Qin, all emperors, high-ranking nobles, and high dignitaries used living people or people from their entourage to be buried alongside them. But after the Qin, institutions changed. Statues or animals or even plants were used instead.
In what state do archaeologists usually find these statues?
When we extract them, not a single statue of the Terracotta Army is completely intact. At best, there are in about 20 pieces. At worst, we've already had 200 pieces. That was a very damaged statue.
Today, a meeting is organized each day between the emperor's legions and the ranks of modern tourists who pay homage to them by shooting quick-fire photos of them. What is striking in this face-off is to what point the soldiers of 2,000 years ago are bigger than today's Chinese, unless the artists of the time enlarged the statues of their models to help them travel through eternity. The first son of the sky, Qin Shi Huangdi, allowed the Chinese Empire to exist. He can therefore be considered as the father of the Silk Road. What could be more logical than this road finishing at his feet in his capital? This stone marks the official starting point of the Silk Road. This commercial route which mixed cultures, arts and religions for millennia and which shaped our world. After travelling slightly more than 12,000 kilometres, this is where the road ends for us. The Silk Road fascinated Marco Polo and all the other caravan merchants, acting like a mirage, a magnet to awaken the curiosity and desire to continue to the end of the Orient. It's had the same effect on me. But like for these anonymous merchants who for centuries were the vectors of knowledge and the arts, one day, like all good things, the journey has to end.